I think there are two reasons why people are reluctant to use the word genocide. The first is a misunderstanding of the definition of the word genocide. Most people who think about the word genocide have never read the Genocide Convention, and so they don't know the definition, which is the intentional destruction in whole or in part. I underline the in part of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. You don't have to intend to destroy the whole group for it to be a genocide or to be an act of genocide. And so what you have are a lot of people who use what I call the all or none school of genocide, who only would use the word for genocides in whole, the Holocaust or Rwanda or the Armenian genocide, where the objective was to in fact wipe out all of the other group. And so and if it doesn't reach that level, they won't use the word. I think that's one of the most common problems. I think the second problem is a problem of political will. People who don't want to use the word genocide often don't want to use it because they don't want to do anything. Genocide is a potent word. It carries not only legal implications, it carries moral implications. It's the crime of crimes. And if you call something genocide, it creates either a legal obligation or a moral obligation. I think more strongly, in fact, a moral obligation to act, to do something, to stop it, or to prevent it. And a lot of countries, a lot of states don't like to feel obligated to do anything. They'd like to just sit back in their nice, comfortable capitals and let that genocide happen somewhere around the world to people who really don't count. And that is, I think, the main reason why the word genocide is not used.
Some human rights organizations, scholars, journalists, and well-meaning diplomats have begun to question the real motive behind Museveni's internment of close to 2 million people in these concentration camps for over 10 years.
But you know, we speak about the war in northern Uganda. There is no war in northern Uganda. How many times have you heard of a battle going on between government forces and the LRM, so many killed on this side, so many killed on that side? How many times? And very few and far between incidental skirmishes. This conflict, so-called war, is marked by the fact that the government forces and the LRA never engage each other. They engage the local population, they brutalize the local population, they don't engage each other. And as many of you who know, the terrain is rather flat, it's savanna. Everybody sees them. Yes. And they go and say to the battalion, by the way, they are there, they're moving there. And the fellows laugh and drink and say, oh, so they're there.
They used to tell us, he used to explain to us that the terrain, we would come, they said terrain is so bad, now the rain has come, now the bush is wrong, now, oh my goodness, it was endless, endless. I'm telling you, Ugandans have gone through agony of the war in the north. We don't have any joy, we don't have happiness. But there were all these excuses. And we used to tell him, but why do you tell people that you are going to deal with the man? Because he would do ego, this ego I told you. Tomorrow I will finish him, I will crush him. But tomorrow he doesn't crush him. The man crushes more people.
Right from the beginning when this war began, the government of Uganda has always been emphasizing on the military solution. That is, fight them and finish them with the guns. But the government after today, 20 years, has not succeeded.
This is not to say that our president also doesn't have too much ego. And I think actually one of the problems why the war goes on and on and on is this ego of President Museveni. He doesn't want to be defeated. He wants to defeat him militarily, and then he's not even managing it. But he doesn't want to show that he is defeated.
The president of Uganda gave a statement that is known to everybody in Uganda. That, you see, I have already put grasshoppers and locked them up in the bottle. They are now eating themselves.
Why is the LRA a convenience president for Mr. Museveni? There are several factors. We've got to be very clear about this. First, as I said, it provides the cover and the pretext for a genocide project that Museveni has been working on for a long, long, long time. This is well documented and well recorded. Mr. Museveni, not the Baganda, not the Banyankole, Mr. Museveni, Mr. Yoweri Museveni.
I have put them in the bottle, closed them up, they are eating one another. It doesn't refer to these people as I told you. Insanity is a kind of grasshopper. I put this insanity in the bottle, they are now eating up one another. And if you look at what is happening now, it's exactly what he stated.
Every episode of genocide is intended, it is orchestrated, is leader-led. Whether it is Hitler in Germany, is Museveni in Uganda, but somebody politically orchestrates it and somebody benefits from it politically. Usually it's a means of dividing and rule, it's a means of getting a scapegoat, it's a way of a political group, a party, a leader, gaining and retaining power. You see, this is a very consistent thing. And because of that, therefore, in each of these situations, that leader and those around that leader would orchestrate a campaign of hate, a campaign of bigotry against the targeted group.
So there had to be a way to put the Achoris and the Baganda at conflict.
Yoweri Kaguta Museveni has very skillfully mastered the ideology of divide and rule. This is well documented in his writings. As a young terrorist and rebel leader fighting the central government of Kampala in the early 1980s, his choosing of the Luwero Triangle as his base was not by chance. He wanted to fully take advantage of the majority of Baganda's bitterness toward Milton Obote for what he did in 1967, and their uneasiness with any person from the north occupying the presidential seat.
So I have to make one the boogie man and the other one the good people. So if they try to oppose me, I will tell them, you see here is the boogeyman coming to eat you. You can see they are still fighting. They are still trying to come back to power, to kill you like they did in Luwero. So be careful, support me in whatever I do. And unfortunately, Baganda, who are my people, they fell into this trap. I saw headlines like Kababikube, which means let those beasts be killed, in the newspapers.
That precedes and punctuates the genocide project. And in northern Uganda, we've seen exactly this, where President Museveni has personally been orchestrating a very toxic campaign of ethnic racism, of hatred, of bigotry, of dehumanization directed against the Acholi in particular and other northerners. And his associates have joined in this. The whole trail, a pattern, very well established pattern. You know, he'll say, we haven't killed enough of them. We've not punished them enough. You wait and see, we'll teach them a lesson from which they'll never recover. Reminiscent of the Rwanda genocide, Mr. Museveni has said, you know, you wait and see what we'll do. They will be like insects, Senene insects they're called in Uganda. When you put them in a bottle and you close the lid, you see what happens. Those people, these are all racist typologies. Those people and us. Those people, they are swine. Those people, they are not human beings, they are biological substances. It's reminiscent of Hitler's Germany. So the scenario in northern Uganda has been replete with all features, classical features of genocide.
This has, an answer has to be found. It's the people like Gigi Nyarapinchwa, the most brilliant people in the country. And the war for the last 20 years is making them look at the Southerners as people who have been manipulating them. And you can't blame them, because they're the people who have been on the front line. So these issues have to be addressed very seriously if Uganda as a country is going to stay as one nation.
The culture of human rights abuse and wanton killings of civilians in Acholi by the National Resistance Movement Army, then transformed into the Ugandan People's Defense Force, started from the time Museveni overthrew Tito Okello in 1986.
Right in the beginning, for the first few months, what things were focused upon searches for hidden guns and things like this, because the NRA was convinced that a lot of the the soldiers of the army that they had kicked out, the ex-UNLA, they were convinced that a lot of them were sort of hiding out in the villages, had buried their guns, and were just waiting there for the time to relaunch their rebellion. So I think in these searches for UNLA, for weapons, a lot of abuses transpired that way. There were a couple episodes of there were a lot of cordon search operations that were going on where they would seal off an area and search through everybody. They would make people go assemble, just, you know, things that, most of it at that point was more of a matter of sort of humiliation and showing people that, look, we don't trust you. We think you are, you know, the enemy, and we are going to, you know, treat you as such. There were also some episodes of killings by NRA soldiers, things like that. It wasn't until a few months after the occupation that violence by the NRA against the Acholi civilian population really escalated. And that's, if you talk to people now in Acholi land, that's the time when they start talking about real abuses by the NRA in terms of killings, in terms of massacres, in terms of rape, in terms of displacement, in terms of going into villages and forcing everybody out of the village and searching the village, forcing people to assemble in cities and then beating the men, or arbitrary arrests all over the place, this kind of stuff.
The most notorious battalion in the early years of NRA UPDF was the 9th Battalion, led by David Tenyafunza. This battalion was infamous for the atrocities it inflicted on the civilian population. Torture methods included the three-piece, or kandoya, where a person's arms are tied to the back, elbows meeting. These were then tied to the ankles in a kneeling position. The person is then suspended in the air for days. People's chests have been known to crack open with this method. At times, people were buried alive in mass graves. On occasion, the dead were buried in mass graves with limbs sticking out. Sometimes dead bodies were disinterred and left on the ground, just to remind the population of who was in charge.
Not only did the government fail to provide resources and humanitarian aid to the camps, but perhaps even worse, they failed to provide any kind of protection to the camps.
Aerial views of most camps in Acholi show that the army barracks are usually located in the center, and the people they're supposed to protect are used as human shields.
The night when the rebels attacked the seminary here, there were about 5 UPDF soldiers. But when they saw the rebels, they disappeared. And the seminarians and the people, the population here, we felt completely abandoned without any protection.
And this was first sort of brought home to me when I began doing research in northern Uganda in 2001. I visited one camp of 45,000 people that only had 40 soldiers. They weren't even regular army soldiers, they were rather home guard. In other words, most of the time, teenagers who were given a gun and $20 a month and told to protect the camp. Another camp of 15,000 people had 12 home guard, quote, protecting it.
There is a need to stop Museveni from making us fear our brothers from Acholi, because that's the culture they have constructed amongst us.
This war, the so-called war, the NRA war, is being the best foil by which Mr. Museveni thinks he can gain and retain power, to divide and rule. You lose support from me, you vote me out, you don't like me, very well, Joseph Kony is coming. You wait for him, he's coming from across the Nile. Huh? I am your protector, I'm your strong man. So run around me, turn a blind eye to what is being done there. As Mr. Mwanje, the writer based in Kampala, he went up north, visited the camps, and he came and wrote, I quote, Ugandans in the south don't know about the genocide being committed across the River Nile.
Different reasons are now being given as to why this so-called war between the regime of Yoweri Museveni and the rebel group, the LRA, led by Joseph Kony, has lasted this long. This is an army that has gone all the way into Rwanda and helped overthrow the government, signaling the beginning of the genocide in Rwanda. Museveni's army also ventured into the Democratic Republic of Congo and helped overthrow the government. While there, according to the ruling of the International Court of Justice, they pillaged the DRC to the tune of $9 billion. Well-meaning people believe that this war has become a war of convenience for Museveni and his commanders. This war allows Museveni to balloon the defense budget without the donor countries asking why. This trickles down to his commanders in the form of fabricated budgets for supplies and ghost soldiers. Museveni also believes that an ever-present military hardware and uniformed patrols in the face of the only population that has stood up to him in the presidential elections gives him a psychological advantage. He has always lost at the ballot box against his opponents in Acholi.
That's why some of us tend to think that although it was not a government policy to let the war go on, but within the commanders that were benefiting from this war in terms of getting more funding, we tend to think that that could have been a problem because they were getting corrupt ghost workers, they get increased more money, the commanders, but the other young people, the fighters who were dying, had no interest in this war.
Ugandan political observers believe that Museveni is trying to consolidate power and wealth into his clan, so as to ensure the survival of his dynasty and his absolute rule of Uganda. There is the 50-year plan. A document was discovered that revealed a secret meeting Museveni had with key members of his clan in the beginning of his rule, outlining what needs to be done to ensure a dynasty for 50 years.
For me, those people who say that Museveni is preparing a dynasty, let me tell you, I trusted that man. I really believed and trusted him. He betrayed me. I feel betrayed, and I told him, you betrayed me, because I trusted him. I didn't expect President Museveni to behave like his predecessors. Never, never. But when they talk of his dynasty, what do you imagine? His wife now, a member of parliament. What is it that the first lady could not do in her position as a first lady that she now wants to do as a member of parliament? And I was very, very close to her. So what couldn't she do that she has to do now when she's in parliament? Now she's in parliament. His brother is a minister. His son has been promoted year after year after year. Those people went to armies who even came from the bush. Some of them have not attained the rank of President Museveni's son. But for him, year after year, he's being promoted. And for me, I believe he's being prepared to become the army commander. One of these days, I think maybe before the 5 years, the guy will be the army commander. And then you remember his brother also, the younger one who used to be a nobody. You should have seen him in Mbarara calling me, fighting me. Where was he from, that one? But he contested to be a member of parliament of Nyabushozi. And then the sister of Mrs. Museveni also contested to be a member of parliament for Nyabushozi. If you don't call that a dynasty, what do you call it?
To consolidate his hold onto power, Museveni over the years has surrounded himself only with cabinet ministers who don't question his actions. They are there only to rubber stamp whatever his decisions are.
The sycophants, I'm telling you, the government of President Museveni now is pure sycophants. And I say it without any fear, because they are.
Because I know the sincerity of President Museveni. I've talked with him, I've been in meetings with him.
No, this is a conspiracy which I will not stand.
Because we have billionaires in Museveni's family. When people are starving, this wealth, the national wealth, has to be redistributed evenly to all people.
Whether you are philosophically for or against the non-governmental organizations, coming into a disaster area and helping out, or as some people may put it, putting a Band-Aid over a cancerous wound, they have certainly made a major contribution in Museveni's policy in northern Uganda.
The NGOs, the non-governmental organizations and aid groups want to call these people internally displaced people, or IDP, so as to hide the fact that they're actually interned in forced displacement camps, that they've been forcibly displaced by their government into internment camps. And they hide that, and thus they sort of, push back or sort of ignore the questions of complicity that arise through their, cooperation with the government in maintaining this population as displaced, by maintaining this population in prison camps, internment camps.
And a whole language is being developed to facilitate this, and the international community has been complicit in disseminating this language, in using this language, in accepting this language.
The Acholi population demonstrated in the years before internment into camps that even with subsistence farming, they can be the food supplies of not only the rest of Uganda, but also the surrounding countries.
Upland rice production has hit a bumper harvest in Gulu this year, and so has Simsim. Within the town, there are 7 mills, but these are not able to cope with the quantity of rice brought in daily from the villages. And behind this bumper are simple peasants, most of them returnees after the war. With their potatoes, cowpeas, simsim, groundnuts, and now rice, these people have made an impact on the national food situation.
This is what a once thriving market looks like today.
The NGOs came in, gave us a hand in giving out relief in terms of food, drugs, and second-hand clothes.
A number of NGOs, as well as the UN agencies, responded to the plight of these internally displaced people in various ways. But on many occasions, the relief was like too small, coming too late. Mzee Benjamin Obalim, a respected elder, has seen it all from the beginning.
Kipoko cham dong pingara chiela chiel. Kila ya dek pidwe chiel. bene karo kene karo tiyo duare muranga mero ero na nyogi muranga bero kilo areo
cái này cả cháu cũng chịu mua bia rồi nhiều mua bông ngoan, rồi, à, jam cái rong kilo, mua cái cháu murang cái cái rong poke, mua cái bịch chèn liền, là nhóc cái, nhóc cái rong mình mấy mua dog bạc để cái nó popong bạc, pe dua chèn, mua pe dua riu pe polo, giá dọc chấm bia,
mà tiền như leta, mero magi poko cái ngara chela chela. Chỉ đồng ý por eno, các đôi in cái mì này kia là đẹp này chăm bị đuổi chèn, cái này gu nhỏ cái ô mà bé.
Đây đồng cái miếng cật trong bột béo cật cái kia cái.
There are many in the camps who have never even been entered into the card system since the World Food Program started with internment into camps. This despite the camp leaders consistently forwarding their names to the WFP.
Well over half of their caloric intake comes from World Food Program, comes from foreign humanitarian agencies, which of course raises an interesting question. In a situation of forced displacement, in a context where a government burns down villages, bombs villages, threatens people, forces people into concentration camps, when foreign aid agencies, when the UN, when World Food Program, when World Vision, Norwegian Refugee Council, when these groups come in and start giving food, providing food in internment camps, start digging wells in concentration camps, are they complicit in the violence itself? Are they complicit in maintaining these camps?
That international community has been complicit in this genocide. They have been complicit at every stage of the program leading to this genocide.
So what message do the NGOs send when they come in to internment camps and feed the population there, and thus make the entire system whereby over 1 million people are forced to live in squalid internment camps, dying 1,000 people a week? NGOs are coming in and maintaining this entire system. They're allowing the massive displacement of the Acholi population to continue by coming in and providing food and providing, digging boreholes and building schools in the camps and everything.
How come those government institutions that advocate human rights, that say never again, would support a regime that is doing this to us? What shall we tell our children in northern Uganda? Shall we tell them that for all these years we didn't know what was going on?
Without any written records of land ownership, many Acholi fear the government of Uganda is stealing the land while generations die in the camps. As the elders perish, so does their cultural identity and connection to the land. The knowledge of land ownership or property lines were passed from elders to younger generations without any title. Perceived rights to land are based upon where one's ancestors are buried. Traditionally, to an Acholi, verbal documentation carried the same legal authority as written land titles. Conditions within the camp make it virtually impossible for the elders to carry out this essential cultural tradition, contributing to the slow death of their society. This fear was exacerbated by a government document authored by Museveni's brother Salim Saleh, which circulated within internet forums during 2006. The document lays out a government plan of refusing to allow people to return to their ancestral land. Over the years, Mr. Museveni and his regime has not only enjoyed unchecked financial support from taxpayers in the West, but he has also escaped the scrutiny afforded other African leaders, creating a double standard from the West.
If we look at other places where governments have attempted this kind of forced displacement, for example, Burundi, the international community wouldn't let it happen. They just simply said, no, you're not allowed to do this. We're not going to stand by while you force a large section of your population into concentration camps. And we're certainly not going to go and then, support these concentration camps.
I recall about the same time that the Museveni regime began to uproot people from the villages and congregate them in the so-called protected villages. About that very same time, in Burundi, the government began to uproot people from their villages and congregate them in the same way. They were called camps de regroupement, assembly camps, protected villages. And the rationale was exactly the same. The rationale was the rural populations are being attacked by rebels. They're in danger from the rebels. The government wants to uproot them, assemble them in particular places where the government can protect them. What was the reaction of the international community? They said nothing doing. They saw right through that humbug, said nothing doing. This is a pretext, this is an excuse to do in the rural population, most of whom were Hutus. So the international community, the United Nations, human rights group, everybody, the European Union, said you've got to dismantle these camps. You've got to allow the rural populations to go back to their homes and villages. And you know what? The pressure was so strong, within months, the camps de regroupement were dismantled and the populations went back to their homes within months.
We are dying here. When you talk of 1,000 per week, it's not the case. It's even more than that. We are being killed. We are dying with disease. We are being underfed, undernourished. We are in the conditions that we never had before. We are not in the houses that we never lived in before. This is disaster.
What do we tell the children of northern Uganda? What shall we tell them when they ask, how come nobody came to stop the catastrophe, the genocide, the nightmare stalking our land, destroying our people? What shall we tell the children?
What have they done, these innocent children? What have they done to innocent children? What have they done to NRM government? What have the children done? You can kill the big people. Maybe they have abused you. Maybe they have rejected to vote for you. But what have the children done?
What shall we tell them when they ask, how come the defenders of human rights, those in whom we had faith, to come to our rescue, to speak out for us, to denounce what is happening to us, how come these very institutions and governments and organizations became the sponsors, the supporters, offering succor and comfort to the very regime that is doing this to us?
The conspiracy of silence does not end only with international organizations, non-governmental organizations, and international governments, but also with national and international institutions of worship.
The church is putting a lot of emphasis on the ministry of evangelism. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, praise the Lord for what? What are you praising God for? When people are dying in Rwanda, you keep quiet. When people are dying in northern Uganda, you keep quiet. When people are dying in Sudan, you keep quiet. Now you say, praise the Lord. Is it for money? Is it for position? For what? Tell us. Time has come for us Ugandans to stand together.
This continues today. Uganda has blocked a move by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights to include on the agenda of the UN General Assembly a report on the human rights situation in northern Uganda. One cannot help but think of each of our own individual roles in shaping this genocide in Uganda. As Michelle Brown, a senior advocate for Refugees International, in a press release dated November 3, 2004, stated, "The international community has failed the people of northern Uganda. This is the world's greatest